Rhinoceroses? Rhinoceroses? Ugh. Come on. I guess. Got a lot of dreams. Heavier on the murder, probably. I do love this gorgeous girl. It's a whole lot easier to fight for a cause when you feel inspired. So I think a big part of this work is finding ways to stay inspired. And on that note, let me show you my inspiration for this channel. Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, Small Steps Towards Making a Difference. I'm Megan, a licensed biology and environmental science teacher. About a year ago, I found this podcast while casually looking for a new one on Spotify. The podcast is called This Wildlife Podcast. I wouldn't say I was instantly hooked, but I was super intrigued, and I learned right away about a species I'd never known about, which I really should have known about before. Today, I want to tell you about why I love this podcast, and no, I do not have any financial ties to them. But first, I want to tell you about why I want to tell you about why I love them, if that makes any sense. I obviously hope that my channel can become a consistent source of information about and motivation to help with environmental issues for you, but these videos are pretty short, and I really only dip my toe into most of these issues. The magic really comes alive when you can dive deep into an issue that you're really passionate about. This podcast allowed me to dive deep into an issue that I knew embarrassingly little about considering my background, and it was so fulfilling and eye-opening for me that it led me to starting this channel. So maybe we should start talking about this podcast already, but you know I love my disclaimers. This podcast is awesome, but it's definitely not edge-of-your-seat entertainment. I love podcasts that are entertainment only. Hello, office ladies, but I also like podcasts that are educational and personal growth based. If you're looking for a podcast that is a little more thrilling, but you still want it to increase your love of the natural world, I recommend National Park After Dark, if you can stomach it. It's gonna go into nature a bit, but it's also about murder. So, although my favorite science subjects have always been environmental and ecological related, I never really got into wildlife like you might expect me to, or certainly my parents expected me to, until now. This podcast is obviously a wildlife podcast, but more specifically, it's a wildlife conservation podcast in which the people who are on the front lines of wildlife conservation are interviewed and their causes are shared. The first episode is made up of an interview with a man named Ray Jensen, who discusses his research and protection efforts with regards to pangolins. If you don't know what a pangolin is, oh my gosh, I'm so excited for you. This is a pangolin. I think they're freaking adorable. But what's most interesting is that pangolins are the most heavily trafficked animal in the entire world. You might think it would be a more well-known species, but no, it's the pangolin. I don't know, that's just kind of shocking to me that the most heavily trafficked animal in the world is one that many people don't know about at all. No wonder that of the 8 pangolin species in existence, 2 are classified as vulnerable, 3 are endangered, and 3 are critically endangered, according to the IUCN Red List. Now, if you're curious about why these little guys are so heavily trafficked, I'll give you a hint. Look at those scales. Keratin, baby. The same stuff that is in rhinoceroses' horns and your fingernails. Really not worth that much. I grow up myself all the time. And yet, in some cultures, it is considered to be sacred. It's considered to be holy, even though it has absolutely no medicinal purposes whatsoever. Sad. Really sad. Talk about pangolins. Spread the word. One of my favorite interviews is with a woman named Shannon Wild, who's a wildlife filmmaker, so it goes into all the importance of wildlife documentaries for conservation efforts, and she's a jewelry maker. Her shop is called Wild in Africa. You can find it online, and each different bracelet that you buy donates to a different cause in terms of conservation efforts, and she chooses the best conservation effort. So I really love my rhinoceros bracelet, personally. Another one of my favorites is with a biologist named Susan Smith, who has this really cool job where she gets to swim with pink dolphins. Yes, you heard me right. There is a species called the Amazon River dolphin, which is endangered, and it's pink, and she gets to swim with them often in her research, which I think is just mind-blowingly cool. Another episode covers what it's like to become a black mamba, which if you haven't heard of the black mambas, they're an all-female poaching unit doing incredible work to lower poaching living in South Africa. And my final favorite episode is with a researcher who talks about the African wild dog. The African wild dog is critically endangered, and the researcher in this episode talks about how he actually thinks they shouldn't be referred to as African wild dogs anymore. He thinks they should be called painted dogs, which I think is a really cool name. And he talks all about why, and I just really hope you listen to that episode because painted dogs are so cute and cool, and they get such a bad rap for no reason whatsoever. Kind of like hyenas. That was the Lion King's fault. So the main reason that this motivated me to create a channel is that at the end of each podcast episode, Amy asks the guests, how can we help? How can we help with your cause for conservation? And pretty much always, they end up saying that one of the biggest ways people can help is by spreading the word, by talking about environmental issues, specifically, in this case, it's with conservation, and just talking about it as much as possible. Then I thought, well, if I created a platform where I could talk about this and many other environmental issues that I know a lot about, maybe, just maybe, that would make the biggest difference. As you can probably tell, I love this podcast, and I hope that you find something that sets your soul on fire too. It doesn't have to be this podcast, obviously. Ideally with regards to the environment, but hey, if you're gonna go be an activist on gun control, we really need that right now too. Your task this week will be easy, but it'll take a little bit more time. Your task is to listen to one of the episodes of this podcast. I gave you some of my favorites if you want to start with one of those, or you could start at the beginning. Personally, my favorite time to listen to podcasts is when I'm cleaning. If you really don't like the idea of this podcast, then please find a different podcast that deals with environmental issues and give that a listen. Hope you enjoy. That's all for this week. Please like, subscribe, and comment. It means a lot. Have a great day. Happy listening to podcasts. Podcasts rock.